Now you are going to be so blessed to hear Miss Susan Cullen, who, at the Speakers Academy Karen and I went to, I was about halfway through the day because we had to do this big final thing, and this poor girl was near the end of the day, really beautiful young woman, and it was like she was having a nervous breakdown. It's awful to be like near the end, especially when everybody before you is like blowing the roof off the place. But I felt into my heart, and I knew who needed to be where, and I knew this is the spot for Susan. Susan is a warrior of love, beauty and grace, deep intelligence, soulful, just really quite magnificent. And so I'd like to welcome her to our stage, Susan Cullen.
Chad, we're good to go. I have it in the ON position. I'm going to start with a story, and it's a true story. It was an ordinary day, like any other, and I was taking the kids to the school bus. And as we rounded the corner, down the alley, we saw the school bus there, as we did pretty much every single morning. And we started to do the 100-yard dash down the alley so the kids could make it on the school bus before the doors closed. And they did, and they got on. And I continued on my little route, as I did every morning after I dropped the kids off. My little dog and I would go on a route around through the park before we made our way back home again. And on this particular day, as I walked through the park, I saw a young man who was sitting on a picnic table. And he looked quite disheveled. And the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. And I got kind of goosebumps. And you know that sort of red flag you get within and sort of go, pay attention? And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to give this guy a wide berth. And so I did, and I walked around, and I kept my eye on him, and as I came around, he got down off the picnic table and went into the bushes. I thought, okay, he's gone to relieve himself. And there's a lot of homeless people who are in this particular park, and I knew a lot of them because I was there all the time with the kids, but this is somebody I hadn't seen before. So he went around, and he went into the bushes, my thought, to relieve himself. As I said, he looked quite disheveled, as if he was either on drugs or coming down from drugs, or he'd had a rough night, let's put it that way. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to continue on, and it's time to get going here. So I continued on walking towards the exit of the park. And this was an off-leash park, and suddenly my intuition said, put the dog on the leash. So I did. I bent down, put the dog on the leash, and we continued walking. I walked towards the exit and got to this point where there was bushes on one side, and the park itself narrowed between these bushes and this big sort of landscaping shed on the other. So it's very sort of hidden part of the park. And just as I got sort of in the middle of that narrow section, I heard footsteps behind me. And I was thinking, well, I wasn't really thinking much at that moment. And then my intuition said, turn around now. And I did. I turned around in exactly that moment. And here's the only way I can tell you and explain what happened next. It was as if time had stopped. And I sort of came out of my body and I was aware in that moment of 3 different parts of myself. The first part was the intuitive part. That was the part that told me to put the dog on the leash and turn around now. The second part was sort of this detached observer part that I heard say, well, this will be interesting. I wonder what's going to happen next. And the third part was my intellectual mind and my ego. And this part I heard say, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. Relevance? This can't happen to me. You must be misjudging this situation. There's tons of people in the park. In fact, that wasn't true. There was nobody around at that moment. And strangely of all, the last one was, I'm wearing rain boots. As if that had any relevance to the moment. And when I turned around, so all of this happened, all of this awareness, all of this happened. I can't explain it other than to say it all happened simultaneously in 1 second, except that I was able to discern the different parts at the same time. When I turned around, what I saw in front of me, about 2 feet away from me, was this young man with his hands up like this, clearly about to grab me from behind. He was about 6 foot tall. I'm not that tall. And then what happened next was this intuitive part of me that was super, hyper present to the moment. Summoned strength. And I felt this energy rise up from the earth. And this energy rose up around me, like it was, I could feel it like 20 feet above my head. And it was the energy of all the women who have ever been harmed by men, who were there to stand by my side in that moment. The young man looked up, dropped his arms, dropped his head, turned around, and walked away. I then turned around, walked away. By the way, my little dog, in case you were wondering, he was there with his tail between his legs, looking up at me. Clearly not the guard dog, but he's a very sweet pup nonetheless. So this was a hugely brave moment for me. But this brave moment didn't start at that moment. This brave moment was the result of 20 years plus of brave moments. And what happened for me in that moment, it was a moment of decision. It was a decision about who I was in that moment. Was I going to be a victim or a creator? So when Janice asked everybody to give their definition of what a brave soul was, the definition that came to me is this: a brave soul is someone who stands in the truth of who they are and has unwavering faith that they are able to handle the situations and the circumstances that arise in their life. And in that moment, I had to decide if I was going to be the victim or the creator. So here's what I've learned, and here's what I know. When we are born, we are a perfect, whole, and complete, beautiful, divine essence. And as we grow up, we have experiences, we have trauma, and all those experiences and trauma cause us to shut down parts of ourselves and create survival strategies for us to continue on. As we move into our adult life, here's the twist and here's the irony. All those things that were our survival strategies growing up become the very things that trip us up in terms of living a happy, fulfilling life. Because what happens is that we lose touch with the truth of who we are. And a brave soul is one who is willing to go back and rediscover that beautiful truth, that essence of who we are. So what happens is we have this beautiful soul that we are, we cut those parts off, we become an adapted self or a false self, and we forget, right? And how I see this show up in my clients all the time is that the one thing that is between where they're at and what it is they want in their life is who they think they are. And that is the most difficult road to cross. And the reason why it's so difficult is because what's being asked of us to go back and rediscover that person, that truth of who we are, means that we have to let go of all those strategies and all those ways that kept us safe as we were growing up. Yeah, take a breath. Take a breath. There's a beautiful quote by Tokopla who says, "Nature is always calling us into greater gestures of bravery, and as we accept those invitations to our personal edge, we lose the ability to shrink into falseness." So I'll give you another example of how this works. In my early adult life, I had an amazing ability. I had the ability to choose boyfriends who seemed nice on the surface and then turned out to be quite abusive. I don't know. Well, I do know how I had this ability, but that's a whole other story. And then I asked the universe, I said, please, send me a boy, send me a man that I can have a relationship who treats me with kindness and respect. And then one showed up, and I felt so uncomfortable. I felt so uncomfortable, I couldn't take it. And I sent him away. And I sent him away. And I sent him away. Well, thankfully, he had infinite patience. And we've now been married for 25 years. So how do we find our way back? How do we find our way back to that truth about who we truly are? And how we do that is brave. Brave is what shows us the way. So what do I mean by that? Okay, here we go. You ready? Give me a B.
B.
Okay, B. B is for be present. Be where you are right now. If you are wanting to go back and reclaim and recover that truth of who you are, where you start is right here in this moment. Give me an R. R. R is for radical self-compassion. This is not an easy journey. And the most important thing that we can always do is be compassionate towards ourselves. We're going to fall down. We're going to make mistakes. It's going to be difficult. We're going to make a decision that we're not going to do that pattern anymore. And the situation will come up and we will cave. And what we need to do is just give ourselves self-compassion. Give me an A. A. A is for awareness. There's two ways. Although we forget who the truth of who we are is, our essence and our soul does not forget about us. So there's two ways that it lets us know where we need to go next on our journey of recovery. Number one is the whispers. The whispers. Which sometimes come in the form of a Janice. Right? That little whisper says, you need to step up. You need to do this. Right? And I can guarantee if it's something that's going to take you back to the truth of who you are, it's going to be terrifying at first brush. The second way, in terms of awareness, is to look at your life and notice the patterns. Notice the patterns that if you are in a certain kind of drama at work, in relationship, and then you leave that, you go somewhere else, and the same thing happens, guess what? There's something for you there. There's a pattern, there's something that's going on, which is probably that you are employing one of the strategies that helped you as a child, which is no longer serving you. So it's time to let that go. So what have we got? B-R-A. Give me a V. V. All right, V. Very small steps. My suggestion, my invitation to you is that as you take this journey of recovering the truth of who you are, be kind, be gentle with yourself, be compassionate with yourself, and take it very slow. There's no rush. There's no rush. There's all of life. Give me an E. E. All right. E is for our environment. I invite you to create an environment where you give yourself time and space to reflect. That you don't fill your calendar so full that you have no ability, no time, no space to do that inner work, that inner reflection. Because that's the only way that this information, that this journey, this way back to yourself is going to happen. So that is my brave formula of finding your way back to yourself. And so why would we want to do this? Why would we want to engage in this brave journey? I'd say for two reasons. One, it's important for you to reclaim who it is that you truly are. You will experience greater love, peace, and you will discover gifts that you never knew you had. The second reason is because the world needs you. The world needs love. The world needs all of who you are. So for me, Oh, and I'll tell you what other little tidbit I've learned over time is that as you peel back the layers, it gets more and more challenging because it gets closer and closer to your heart. So one of the most difficult layers for me, one of my most, I would say my biggest fallback strategy was to hide. And then Miss Janice called me up to be part of Brave Souls Day. And I said yes. And so, this being seen is extremely challenging for me. I don't know if you can see the microphone shaking. And I bought this dress for Brave Souls. This is my Brave Soul dress. And one final thing I have to say. I owe some of the organizers an apology because as we were planning this whole Brave Souls, we were asked to do certain things which for me, I couldn't do. It was too scary, and I just couldn't do it, and I'm sorry for that. And Janice had asked us to give quotes for her book. And I wanted to give mine, but I thought that it wasn't good enough to give, and it wasn't good enough for your book. And after her book had gone to print, I confessed this to her. I said, I'm so sorry. And she said, that's okay. You could be part of the card deck. I thought I had dodged that bullet. So if you get Janice's cards, you'll notice something. There are 53 cards. There are 52 weeks in the year. So you can have one Brave Soul card for each week that you can look at and be inspired by. And there's a 53rd one to remind you that it's never too late. So by the way, I forgot to add the final tie back into my first story. So having the strategy of hiding, as I'm standing there in the park that day, there was nowhere to hide. And I had had a victim personality for a very long time. And that was my moment of really deciding, was I going to be a victim? Or was I going to be a creator? And it really doesn't matter what the outcome of that day was. The outcome wasn't what was important. What was important is what I stood in that moment. Thanks.
Susan is a life coach, and her talk, it really was so organized. Like a therapist doesn't have to be organized at all, trust me. But life coaches, like that's why I can't do life coaching. See how organized she was. And Susan's also doing something else brave she didn't speak about. She started some women's circles in Calgary. So there's information on the back table if you're interested, and I'm sure there'll be just a wonderful experience.